Can see and hear you.
Yep,
There you
now
go.
it says we're live. Hello, everyone. We had a little technical difficult there for a minute, so we're just going to jump right on. My name is Tanya Yulin, and I am SVP of Mortgage Lending at Aceland Mortgage. And today we have Thomas King. I'm going to basically just let Tom introduce himself since we're a little late.
Tanya, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for letting me speak and share a little of the wisdom that I have to impart. I'm a divorce attorney. My practice is 100% family law, and most of that is either a divorce or what we call post judgment, or if people simply have a child together, coming to terms with child support and parenting time. I've been an attorney for 20 years. The first part of my career, I was a prosecutor in Brooklyn. Then I worked on Wall Street for a couple of years as an attorney there. And then I had a very difficult divorce. And it really changed the way my career path, because I didn't want to happen to other people what had happened to me. And I wasn't prepared and I didn't know what I was getting into. And a divorce can be the single biggest financial event in your life. If you're not careful, if you're not prepared, if you don't make smart decisions, it can be a very negative financial life event, but it doesn't have to be. And part of why I now only practice family law again is I didn't want people to go through what I went through. And a part of that is something that you and I have talked about, that treat divorce as it's a breakup of a company. You are a business, the Good Ship LLC. You got married. That marriage certificate, that's no different than an LLC that you just created. And when you're breaking apart your marriage, you got to look at it the same way. And and part of that is not letting the divorce and the process be an opportunity for you to try and right wrongs or to hold people, to account for things that they've done. I have, clients that I spend a lot of time trying to talk them out of, this isn't the time to try and right that wrong. This is the time to play poker. This is the time when you are, negotiating the breakup of AOL and Time Warner. And you've got to make good financial decisions based on that. You've got to be thinking ahead about that. Again, the statistics on breakups, it can either be a financial event that impacts you and it's a bump along the road of life, or it can destroy you, and you don't want it to do the latter. You've got to be prepared and understand that it is just a financial. Treat it as the economic event that it is, the breakup of the business of your marriage.
I think that is a very strong statement. And I think if there's any takeaway from today, I really hope that really resonates with people that are going through this transaction, because unfortunately, it is a very emotional state. But like Tom said, it's not the time to kind of fight. You're already at the divorce table, so the decision's been made. You're moving forward. So it is very important to just kind of hunker down your emotions and get tuned in and zone in into the fact that it is a financial transaction now. It is a financial decision that you're making at this point. So tell us a little bit about that, because I'm sure that how do you prepare your clients to kind of get into that mindset? Because I think that that's really good, important advice. And I'm not sure how many of us that unfortunately go through the process really take that advice, and we allow our emotions to get the best of us in the decision making process.
Right. And it's about developing a relationship, with your attorney, and developing a relationship of trust, and, understanding that we are out for your best interests, and discussing with them and being open and being honest with them. A lot of times you start and you have the first initial meeting, and then you've got a second meeting. And then I don't find things out until we're 6 months into the divorce, a year into the divorce, that there's information that would have helped me make give you better advice at the beginning. And so being open, and part of that is coming prepared as well. So one of the things that people can do is don't put your head in the sand when you're getting a divorce. Be aware and start collecting your financial information. The cost of divorce, it can be prohibitive. It can be so expensive, and there are ways that you can keep the cost down. One of them is doing as much of the discovery on your own. So much of the costs of divorce, and a divorce can either be $2,000, $5,000, $50,000, $500,000. And the difference between those relatively inexpensive, the formula of getting the divorce done, and expensive divorces, 9 out of 10 times, it's about discovery. It's about finding out that information. And you can do a lot of it your own and be prepared. Gather the financial documents, gather the banking records, put them somewhere and store them offline. Buy yourself a scanner. Go through all of the folders that you have. When mail starts coming in, take a scan of it. Take a picture of it. Have Google Docs so that you can save those things. Oftentimes, somebody will come in and they'll say, well, I think there's a bank account here. I think there's a business here. I think that he owns something there, or that she has this over there. And then it's my job to try and do the discovery to do that. That costs money. And it's not always easy. Eventually I will find those assets, but it would have been so much easier if somebody had thought, okay, I'm going to be going through the divorce process. Let me be organized like this. Look at it like, you're sending your kids to college and you're helping them with their college applications. My God, I see parents that it's like they're at the moon launch. They're so organized about everything. They know all the details. They have all of the information. Yet when they come to try and do their own divorce, they come in hat in hand and have really ignored the financial reality. And yes, an attorney can do that work for you, but try and do as much as you can. And that will save you money in the long term. You'll feel more comfortable about the decisions that are being made. And you'll have more ammunition to go in on as even a playing field as you can when you do negotiate your final settlements.
So you mentioned some really great stuff, which is, collect your financial information, try and do as much discovery as you can on your own, store your documentation offline, something like Google Docs. Is there any other kind of applications or any other kind of, I know one time we had a conversation how there's some sort of application out there that allows you to copy your text.
So other things, a lot of when you file a motion, a vast majority of times, there is some communication that has gone on that is part of your proofs. And, understanding, knowing your judge, knowing the clerk that is going to be reading it, knowing what it is that they want to see is important. And part of that is preparing something that is easily read, that gets to the point. And if you use iPhone, using a what's called an SMS text exporter so that you can export your texts and it will save them. Things happen to your phone. And, unfortunately, when you're going through the divorce, it's like you're in the middle of a snowstorm and you become forgetful. And that's going to be the time that you drop your phone in the toilet. That's when you're going to lose it and leave it at the Starbucks. And that's when you need it most. And so I do recommend when people come in, one of the first things I do is I say, back up your cell phone. You might need some things that was said 3 years ago, 5 years ago, or even just last month. And then when you give that information to your attorney, don't give them screenshots, because you send me a screenshot, I have to take that and say, well, I need to convert this to text. Do I need to put in a date stamp to it? And what could be just a very inexpensive process becomes more expensive. And so there are third-party apps out there like SMS phone export that will download and export into your text messages into either Word or a PDF or Excel, something like that. It also allows you to do a word search. I know that we talked about, the BMW. I know that we talked about the vacation home. I know that we talked about another bank, but I can't remember when. And instead of scrolling, for 14 hours to try and find when you said that, if you download it, you can do a word search and then you can find it.
That's great advice. I can personally say, unfortunately, when I went through my process, I think that's when all hell broke loose for me, because it's when women get pregnant, women have something called pregnancy brain. We have baby brain. I think it's the same kind of, but obviously one has to do with your anatomy and the other one is an emotional thing. But I think you're just so distracted emotionally that those are the moments when, like, you might forget to make a payment on time for your bills. You might forget to charge your phone at night and you fry your battery or something. And for me personally, I did end up losing all of the data on my phone because something happened where I couldn't remember my password. And I remember crying about it and just thinking, I can't believe remember my password.
Right.
But I didn't need a backup for so long. And when I finally logged into iTunes, it really kind of screwed me up. And I had to create a new password and it wiped out everything.
Yep.
And there went the discovery, right? So it's so important to just prepare, like you said, but we're also showing you that there's actually tools out there that can help you so that you don't have to basically just bombard yourself with all this insurmountable amount of responsibilities that you have at this point. So as far as financial documentation, what are you looking for in a divorce case?
Well, it depends. Usually there is one person who is the primary wage earner. And, people assume that divorce will be fair. It's not. What you try and do is even it out as much as you can. And, I get people who have given up their career choices. I think that oftentimes you have one party who has sort of taken the back seat, either to raise the kids or because they moved or for whatever reason. And taking a look at the holistic view of that, of those finances and trying putting people back in a place that is as even as possible takes a lot of creativity and it takes a lot of information, and it's unique with each party. A scenario where you have a housewife who gave up their career, or they mitigated their career because they raised the kids and now they've gone, and now you usually will have a husband who is trying to just run the numbers. And it's not always the numbers, because there were opportunity costs, and there is case law that does take into consideration that somebody has taken the back seat, that has raised the kids. Maybe they've gone back to work, and taking those things into consideration. Another really important thing is, I get a lot of people come through my door because they were divorced 5 years ago, 7 years ago, and they've got a very boilerplate settlement agreement that didn't take into consideration looking ahead about what the possible changes are. It's not 1965 working for IBM where somebody has a job and they're going to retire from that job and they're going to get the gold watch and everything is there. Things change. And so much of post-judgment work is burden of proof. And one of the things that I try and do is understand careers and career paths to say, okay, when things change, because they will change, what are you going to need to show to go back and make those small adjustments that are going to be necessary in order for the agreement to be as fair as possible?
So now when you are doing the interview, obviously you're asking all these questions that could be pertinent to making a strong case. What are some suggestions that maybe people can do on their own? So like making a timeline for you Is making a letter of explanation for what happened helpful to you at all?
Yeah, in New Jersey, it's there's a thing called, your marital lifestyle, and you need to be able to show, well, what were your expenses during the course of the marriage. Alimony, which is, more, they call it spousal support now, but call it alimony. A short-term marriage, you really don't get alimony. And short-term is 3 years or less. 3 to 5 years, you're going to get a little bit of alimony. 5 to 8 or 9 years, it's another level. And then beyond that, the amount of time and also the dollar amount at the end of the day that actually does get awarded or settled on, also, will go up to reflect that. And, people, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there. What was your
We were
question?
talking about marital lifestyle.
Yes. So what people can do to prepare, and going through and making the spreadsheet, going back and finding the credit card statements to show, well, when we first got married, this is what we were spending. This is what our expenses were. We were spending a little bit beyond our means, ran into a little debt. And then in the middle part of our marriage, this is what we had. And here for the last few years, we both have been making more money, and this is our marital lifestyle. The court is going to try and wait and take a look at a holistic picture of the marriage. You're not going to be held to the beginning. You're not going to be held to the middle, but it will have a part of that. And it's as much art as science. And the more information that you can give your attorney, the better the picture they can get of what the marital lifestyle is. I will also say that the single biggest piece that is missed by most attorneys that I see out there is a savings component. And, a lot of people, you start off young and you're overspending, you're not saving anything. And then when the time comes that you need to start putting away some money for retirement, oftentimes is when the divorce happens. And you need to argue that savings component should be a part of your marital lifestyle, and that needs to be a part of your spousal support or alimony.
I love that. That is that's a great point. I actually have a friend who I was talking about this in the insurance industry, and we're talking about how in divorce, in the property settlement agreement stage of the divorce, how important it is to establish like your IRA for, in addition to maybe an alimony or all that, because like you mentioned, those were opportunity costs lost, right? So if someone took a step back to be a stay-at-home wife, well, who's going to compensate for all that time that she lost and she doesn't have a retirement account? So, all those things are important to kind of think about and set up, so that you need somebody to guide you that can give you all these tools and all this information. So as it relates to the savings component, so you're talking about future savings. So tell me a little bit more about that. That's a great point.
I will, but I also want to touch on insurance. I think I see a lot of my fellow lawyers not appreciate the value that insurance book has over time, and it needs to be an asset. And I've had clients come that have been divorced several years, take a look, tell me where I'm at. Why is he still living, high on the hog, and I'm barely getting by? When we were married for 25 years, something went wrong. And I look and I say, I'm sorry, but he was able to retire, and so he doesn't have to work, but he had that book of business that wasn't valued at the time of divorce, and it should have been, because it could have been sold, but they're not usually sold. Usually that's just a residual that goes on top, and it really needed to be taken into account that you had built this thing. So often people just plug in numbers when his income last year, let's look at the tax returns. This is what it is. This is what the alimony is going to be. In the case of an insurance agent, you've developed a book of business over time, and that needs to be valued. And just finding an attorney that has some real life experience and understanding to help you not make mistakes when you're developing your marital settlement agreement. That savings component is also important. There are times when people save more than at other times, and a good settlement agreement will take that into consideration and understand that, maybe for over your 15-year marriage, for the first 10 years, you weren't saving anything, because a lot of people don't. That's when the kids are younger. That's when this. That's when the finances really didn't allow you to. But in the last couple of years, this is what you should be doing. And incorporating that into the marital lifestyle is important. And it's also fair.
So now with respect to cost of living, is that something that's plugged into your numbers, or is that something that people don't consider as well?
Well, COLA, cost of living, is it can be important. It's difficult to put into an agreement, and divorce agreements like finality. That's one of the things. Contracts, judges are case law. When you get in front of a judge, they want something that's got a final number, that is done. There's value to allowing you just to move on with your life, so that you don't have to revisit, that cost of living, every year. But what is important, if there is a change, and again, I talked about this at the very beginning. Well, what is the burden of proof? If you have to prove a cost of living increase, if you have to prove, well, when we entered this agreement, my rent was this, and now my rent's gone up 4 times, and that's a change in circumstances. I want to go back and renegotiate my settlement agreement on my 25-year marriage. Theoretically, can you do it? Sure. Are there some cases that, show you can do that? Absolutely. Is it really hard? And do they fail 99% of the time? And do they require, a lot of money that usually you don't have in order to litigate that? And so depending on, where you're at, I usually try and, if people owned a home and they're getting divorced and the home gets sold, man, put some of that back in, to the real estate market. Don't, become a renter when you weren't, unless you can really rationalize why, because you are susceptible to cost of living increases, most of which is going to be overhead. People, food, not so much, but it's that cost of living of your domicile that can really throw you off.
I love that, because I do mortgages, so I really appreciate that. But I completely agree. I think especially in the rate that we see everything is moving right now. Everybody thought in 2020 that the market was going to be destroyed because of COVID. It turned to be the complete opposite. It just incentivized everybody to want to buy a house, because who wants to get stuck in an apartment with a landlord and not have your own freedom and privacy? So the housing market just blew up. Then add in the low rates and all that. The low inventory today is a problem. So if you do have real estate, you really should consider how the cost of opportunity today is going to be a lot higher than when you purchased, correct?
Right. And on that, one of the things that, and I'm finalizing a settlement agreement, that has this incorporated into it for one of my clients, is there's actually value in that 2.9, 3.5, 4% 30-year, 20-year mortgage. That has a dollar value. And convincing somebody and working with somebody, step away from it. That's a hidden asset, and let the other party have it, but then ask for something in return. If, the marital home, it's just an asset. It's just a thing. And if you can use that to increase your negotiation position, don't let it become a point of pride. Look at it like, again, this is a business transaction. In 5 years, it really won't matter who was in it if you can utilize that to your advantage, or at least to make it more fair. And if you're going to stay, do whatever you can to stay in that house. Some mortgages, if it's an FHA, if it's a first, you can do an assumption. Most of them you can't. But even if you can't, so be willing to stay on the mortgage for a few years if that means you get something in return. Yeah, and or if the other person, part of poker and part of negotiation is understanding where people's where their cruxes are, what is really important to that person, and if staying in the house is really important to the other person, and use that to your financial advantage, and use that for, okay, I'll let you stay, in the house, but then I get more, support for the difference in the interest rate that I'm going to have to pay as opposed to what you are going to have to pay.
That's brilliant. So we're going to step away from the conversation of divorce real quick, just because I want to point out why your point of view is the way that it is. So tell us a little bit about your background, because you had some great experience that's bringing you to this kind of perspective and take on divorce.
Well, I went to law school, and I was going to be, a prosecutor, and I got a great job as a prosecutor in Brooklyn, and it was my dream job, and I'm living the law and order. And it was. I'm going to close this up for a second. The sun was going down there, coming through the window. So I was a prosecutor in Brooklyn, and just really enjoying, being a law and order, just like on TV prosecutor. And then you have kids, and you can't afford life on a prosecutor's salary. And so I went to work in the private sector. And I was very fortunate, and found a couple of jobs on Wall Street and was making some very good money. And then you come home one day and realize that the marriage has failed and you're in the middle of a divorce. And I was very blindsided by the finances. I realized also by seeing how the attorneys were working. So I was an attorney myself. Right. Hired the two attorneys, and I just saw them take control, and I saw how one attorney could really, impact the divorce process. What could have been, a more amicable and less expensive, just from a sheer litigation standpoint, wasn't. And I spent a lot of time thinking how it could be done better. And that's part of, the biggest reason why I went into family law. I didn't want to have happen to other people what happened to me, which was I didn't go in, prepared. I didn't go in. I was personally devastated, like you talked about, pregnant brain, same sort of thing, divorce brain. And I look back on the things, and even while I was in it, going, I should be doing this differently, and I didn't. I just want to make sure that other people are prepared and armed, because I wasn't, and it can really set you back financially. You make, we got one life, and not to be as smart as you can about this very significant, if not the most significant thing that you will go through.
It's interesting that we can take our experiences and our failures and turn them into challenges that could basically help other people. I feel like I had the same experience as you. You also mentioned something with respect to, litigation, and In real estate, we often have some transactions where we'll had a litigation attorney that's handling a real estate transaction, and we're like, it's not the same thing. We're just trying to negotiate a contract, and we're just trying to get to the closing table. Everybody's got this, seller wants to sell, buyer wants to buy. And I think it's important to note that when you're looking for attorneys, that you find somebody that is going to, one, be like-minded, someone that's going to fight for you the way that you want to fight for. And tell us a little bit about the different kinds of attorneys: the litigator, the negotiator.
Yeah, and you want a negotiator, a transactional attorney, in because it is a transactional, and too many people and too many family law attorneys, view what they do as confrontational.
Mhm.
In law school, in your continuing legal education, there's a lot of discussion about being a transactional attorney, that you're trying to help with the transaction. And unfortunately, too many people don't view it as transactional. They view it as confrontational. And how do you find an attorney that will view it as transactional? And it's it can be a real crapshoot if you don't know the players, and if you don't know the reputations of the people out there. And I think one of the best ways to pick an attorney is to ask another attorney. Ask a real estate attorney who they would recommend for an amicable, fair divorce. Ask, and sometimes I will get calls from people like, hey, who would you recommend? Absolutely, I tell them. You can ask another divorce attorney, hey, who would you recommend? And I'm, and I get occasional calls from people too. Hey, I had somebody come in, they were looking for a recommendation. Do you have bandwidth to take on a new client? Sure, send them over. So
That's great advice too. So that actually, I think, in my opinion, having the right attorney can really, really either set you up or set you off to a disaster.
and with that, do find somebody who devotes the majority of their practice to family law. It's if it is nuanced. It is it's not something that you can sort of dabble in. The transaction of doing a closing. Any attorney, we learn how to do a closing. For a client, because there's oftentimes somebody is buying or selling a house as a part of a divorce. I will do their closing. It's transactional. But for nuanced business valuation support, when there's custody or parenting time issues, you really want to find somebody that does that almost exclusively.
I think just like anything else in my world, we have underwriters, right? So different underwriters look at cases differently. So it is very interesting when you'll take a regular conventional loan and you give it to an FHA underwriter, and they want to give you 100 conditions that you don't need because conventional underwriting is different. The risk tolerance is different. So I assume that you're saying the same thing, that knowledge is power, experience is power. You talked about how you would treat an insurance agent. I mean, I'm sure you know the nuances of how to treat someone that has a pension and works for the state. So these are things that are very specific, and this is the reason why you want to find someone. I personally feel that if you're going to go look for an attorney, you also have to interview the attorney. Most people feel like they are the interviewee, but they forget they are also the interviewer because they're hiring the attorney. So you want to be able to do that. So now we talked about a lot of things here. We talked about documentation that we think is important, that you should collect, how important preparation is, some technology tools and some recommendations for that. We talked about how putting together a holistic picture of your marriage. What did you call it? Your marriage
Your marital lifestyle.
Your marital lifestyle is so important. Talk to us a little bit about child support and alimony.
Well, those are two big financial components, and they are related and they're not related. Child support in the state of New Jersey, it's overnights, which isn't always fair. You get parents who do the yeoman's work. Hey, every day after school, somebody goes to somebody's house, but then mom or dad pick them up on their way home. And you really have to fight to get away from the, or not fight, but you have to have prepared your arguments to get away from just being a straight guidelines case where so many cases, do, merit a closer look as to who is actually, spending the time, who is spending the money, how can it be most evenly and fairly divided. At over about $280,000 a year, if that's the gross income, then you go what's called off guidelines and you have a lot of freedom to make arguments. I don't think that a lot of attorneys, take a look at, where the actual work is being done raising children. And they let the cases only be done, straight off the guidelines. Where even within the guidelines, you still have a lot of nuance that you can give. How much of a teen percentage adjustment are you going to make? What sort of adjustment, will you make? What are you going to be doing over the summers? There's a lot that can go into that. Another thing that people, I don't think, spend enough time on when they're talking about child support and they're talking about their marital settlement agreement is about college costs and how that's going to be decided and keeping you out of court when that time comes. Setting in place, this is our plan for college for, our children. This is what we expect. This is what I expect, my costs to be. For a couple gets divorced, a child is in middle school, in 5 years they're applying to college. After a few years, couples are rarely on the same financial footing, and it's life. It happens, and $20,000 towards college can mean a lot to one parent, where to another, it's no big deal. And being able to look forward is to say, well, what is a reasonable expectation for what your financial status is going to be? And sometimes as an attorney, I need to be a reality check for my clients because they want to look like they are the super parent, and they'll agree to, oh yeah, we're going to split college when that time comes. You know how much NYU is? It can be $80,000-$90,000 to send a child to school in New York City. And, yes, if that is, something that is going to help your children, absolutely do it. But don't agree to something that that could really harm you, financially when there are ways to draft an agreement. When the time comes, this is what we're going to do. I want to be involved in the decision-making process. We need to make sure that the college, decision is one that will actually benefit the long-term job prospects and economic outlook for a child. And, just because you can get into NYU film school doesn't necessarily mean that you should go there if it's going to financially, harm, one of the parents or both of them.
So now that brings me to another point. So obviously you need to have experts accessible to you. So how often or how many resources should someone look for, when they're thinking about things like this, like you're thinking about college and you're like, yeah, I'll have it covered. I'll put in a student loan. You don't realize those Parent Plus loans are not what most people believe that they are. They are not deferred. They are paid immediate. they are private loans.
Yeah.
So do you have experts that usually people can counsel with in order if they need that certain type of advice?
I don't have those experts because the schools do. And my God, you've got to talk to, the college finance, office about, about how to best pay when that time, does come. And unfortunately, you don't know where your child's going to be going in a couple of years, and you don't even know what the possible expenses would be. But what you can do is, again, some of that magic language that I talked about is definitely make sure that when you're agreeing in your marital settlement agreement about how the college is going to be split, that one of those components be, is the cost going to be justified because there is a material benefit. Most of the kids that get into the NYUs, also got into the Rutgers and need to, balance that, because it can be financially devastating to be stuck with a college expense that may not have a benefit. And sometimes it's your attorney having that cold, hard talk with you because your heart is you want your kids to go to the best place possible. And another component of that as well is I find that when you have a parent who is a primary wage earner, they don't like paying, alimony. They don't want to do it, and it's a fight. And one of the things that I like to do is discuss with my client. Okay, is there another way that we can do that? Take on a greater portion of the college contribution. Every year, instead of paying, pick up more of the, agree to pay for a car, agree to pay for the insurance, agree to pay for the 529. Do things, try and get creative so that you don't have the fight. What's frustrating is when people will spend more money on litigating an issue than what the final expense was going to be. You'll spend $20,000 on motion practice about the difference of $200 a month in alimony, and having attorneys that will say, stop, wake up, figure something out. You can't agree on the $200. How about if, that $200 goes, towards your son? Well, okay, I'll do that.
That's so important. That's really good advice, because I do find I've personally known some people that have been in the divorce process for years just because they can't let up. They can't let up on some issues, and they're like, it's fine. I actually met someone one time that told me it was 13 years
of being in the divorce. Well, that would be a record. But
13 years she was still in it. She just refused to give in to whatever it was that they were fighting about. I can only imagine those bills, those attorney bills. So we covered child support. We covered alimony.
Well, we touched on it. Now, there's an interesting thing. When you're doing a settlement and you're throwing and you're knocking numbers around and you're trying to get an idea of where this probably will settle, there's some basic rules. Not rules. There's some guidelines that you might follow, where you would take the difference between the two parties' income. So one party makes 200,000, the other makes 100,000. It's 100,000 difference, and then you would take 0.25 of the difference. And if you were to have, and that's at non-taxable, so the person who receives the money doesn't have to pay the tax on it. If for whatever reason you needed and there was a benefit, to having the person pay the tax on it, that number would probably be about 30%, but it's 0.25. So basically, under that scenario, your starting point is going to be $25,000 a year, and paid for monthly or biweekly, however you want to do it. And then you argue up or down based on the unique factors in that divorce. That's the negotiation that goes on. If you get to trial, if you go to arbitration, if you get into the weeds, it's not that. It is 100%, well, what was the marital lifestyle? and what is the ability to pay so that both parties can, as much as possible, come close to that marital lifestyle. And so you really have two different models that you need to think about depending on when you get, if you're going to do a quick settlement, or if it's going to take a little bit longer and you're going to negotiate based on the marital lifestyle.
Okay.
That's just the reality.
Now, how about mediation? How has that changed the process in divorce?
It is, well, here's an important thing. Mediation, that's a recommendation. Take it or leave it. Go to mediation. What is said at mediation dies at mediation. If you don't walk out of mediation with a signed agreement, everybody signed it, it's as if it didn't happen. And you're not even allowed to bring it up at a later mediation. You're not even allowed to bring it up in court. But judge, at the mediation we had, this was it. That said, mediation is important. Mediation can get you through some very sticky issues, because there are some very, very good mediators out there. And picking the mediator for the personalities is also very important. Some of the mediators I think are just jerks, and that's actually what you need. And I'll get to know clients, and I get to know the other side. And I'm like, I'm talking to the other attorney about picking out a mediator, and I'll say, well, what do you think about Madam X? And they go, oh, they're horrible. And I'm like, exactly. We need somebody that is just, going to get in there and yell at the clients and try and put it through. And sometimes you need somebody that is, going to be more compassionate and empathetic. It really can be finding the right personality. Now, so you have a mediator, very important. You want to try and mediate, but you've also got a thing called an arbitration, and an arbitrator can be binding. And that's a big difference. Sometimes going to mediation can be, and you want an attorney that understands the adversary, the other attorney, you want to understand the finances. My God, this couple, they've got $15,000, to get divorced. Do we want to go to mediator? Well, if the other party's got a rich uncle that will fund me, litigation, I might tell my client, we don't want to go to mediation because we run a risk that we get there, we spend all this money, and we don't settle. Better to go to arbitration, where a good arbitrator will try and mediate. Let's see if we can agree. Let's see if we can agree. If you can't agree, I'm going to decide for you. And part of that is the strategy of understanding, let's try and keep the costs down. Let's not go to mediation after mediation after mediation after mediation. And, going to an arbitration where it's going to get settled, it's going to get done, you're going to be heard. The other thing that I like about mediation and about arbitration is, a trial or in motions, you've got the rules of evidence, can be so restrictive that important parts of the story aren't necessarily told, because there are rules about hearsay. There are things that the judge just will say, not pertinent, that are important to you, and I think important to the big picture, where you can get that in at mediation and arbitration. It is important. And also because in New Jersey right now, there's a real shortage of judges. And so actually getting a judge who will make a decision on a motion, who will schedule your trial, can be tough.
So now, and mediation is mandatory, isn't it?
Yes. You've got several points of mediation where you're getting a divorce. You get initial discovery, very basic, a thing called a case information statement, which is basically your financial snapshot. Do that, then one of the first things the court will do is schedule you for early settlement panel. That's a mediation. That's where you go in front of either 2 or 3 volunteer matrimonial attorneys who will review your case. I volunteer on the panel in Sussex. So in Sussex County, if you were having your divorce, you might get me as one of your panelists, one of your mediators. And we take a look at it, and we give you if you want to settle this thing today, this is where we think it should settle. Oftentimes, that can be a good thing. Oftentimes they miss the whole picture, and because you can't really get to know a case
Right.
in the hour that you get with your mediator. If that fails, then you have to pick an economic mediator. There's a list of economic mediators. You try and, like I was saying earlier, match the personality of the mediator that you think will do best for the clients, and you get the first 2 hours of their time is free. That's part of just if they're on the roster, they can do that. But then after that, you have to share the costs, and you have to go to that economic mediation. And there will be other times that there could be a blue ribbon panel. There will be another mediation. There will be a lot of mediation that goes on if you're not able to decide early on. There's always going to be that opportunity. The court will never force you, though, to go to arbitration. And I think that's an underutilized tool in the, get the divorce over, inexpensive but fair, is going through arbitration.
So with arbitration, do you still require an attorney? You still have attorney representation?
You do.
Okay.
And you definitely want to have attorney representation, because sometimes you need somebody to be a jerk. Sometimes you need somebody, to yell and to take positions that maybe you wouldn't, in your heart of hearts, just to try and do that negotiation. It's sometimes it's good cop, bad cop, and you are in the thick of it. You don't want to be doing surgery on yourself. You don't want to, even if you're a dentist, don't do your own dental work. If you were again, getting back to our original thing, this is a breakup of a company. And if you were the president of the company, you're not going to be negotiating that on your own. You need other people to negotiate, on your behalf. And and understanding, what needs to go into this to keep us out of court in the future. Again, something that I don't think attorneys spend enough time on is there's a race to the finish line, where that finish line needs to take into consideration, well, if they are back in court 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, why? And what can we put into this agreement today to try and keep them out of court? But if they do come back to court, make it as amicable, as quick, inexpensive as possible to resolve.
That's excellent. I love that. So I think we pretty much covered the process, right? So we covered how an intake, it's so important to match with the right person so that you can have someone that is a similar mindset as you, that's going to help you and fight for you, that's going to look at you holistically, not just as numbers and a formula. I mean, sometimes, like we mentioned, transactional divorces can make sense. I mean, in what scenario does a transactional divorce, a quick divorce, happen?
Oh, it when both sides agree, and both sides, many divorces could be settled in the first couple of days, and they should be. When I have a client come in and I talk to them, one of the things that I lay out for them is, okay, here is what I think. If I think it's one of those cases that could settle quickly, one of the first things I do is, okay, they've come in, they've described it. I say, they've given me their financial picture. I put together a letter to the other party, and it's basically, Mr. Smith, I've been retained by your wife to help, guide her through what is hopefully an amicable and fair divorce. After, discussion, with her, here is a tentative proposal. Take this and go to another attorney, have them review it, And if you come back that this is a fair agreement, I can memorialize this in a more formal settlement agreement, and we can have that agreement signed, and we can put this through as an uncontested divorce. Having an attorney that at the very beginning will give a fair proposal can save you, years of litigation expense and heartache and a nightmare. And finding somebody that will do that, I think.
So are most attorneys willing to do that with the shortage of judges today?
I don't get enough of those letters. And maybe people didn't go through a bad divorce. Maybe I don't know why there isn't more initial offers. Let's firm this up. Here's the basics, and we can work out. Who gets what car later on. The big part: child support, alimony. What's going to happen with the house, and lay that out. Sometimes attorneys, I think, don't like showing their hand because they feel that becomes the negotiation point every time afterward. I haven't found that. And I think there are two experiences that I've had that have influenced my my style. Again, I worked on Wall Street, both for broker dealers for a number of years, and as a trader, it's transactional, and markets change and things change, and just having a Wall Street mentality about closing this deal is a little bit different. And also as a prosecutor, I'm not scared to go to trial. I'm not scared to, well, let's argue it. Let's go in front of the judge today. I can call the judge. Let's get it in there. Let's make this an order to show cause. Here's an issue. Let's view that. I think that some attorneys might be scared of putting out an initial position because they feel that will hurt them in the future. I have not found that, and I've only found that it has helped people. Another thing is, when divorce attorneys get together after work and we have a beer. So do you do an initial consultation for free? I always do. Not all of my colleagues do. And part of that is I want to find out if we're a good fit. I want you to get to know my mentality, my philosophy. I do have people come in the door that that I don't think would be the right fit for me. And so I sincerely try and think of who would be the right attorney for them. Sometimes there's, areas of specialty that I say, this is really who you should, go and see. There's going to be this issue. They might be a better fit.
So I think we're coming down to the end. And so before we get cut off, I just want to say thank you so much, Tom. All this information has been extremely helpful. I'm going to put some notes. So if anybody wants to contact us, we're available. If you want to just say your phone number or your contact really quickly.
I'm an attorney in North New Jersey. I practice throughout the state. And my website is thomaskingesq.com.
Perfect. All right. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And if you have any needs, please reach out to us. My name is Tanya Yulin. And thank you and good night.
Tanya, thank you.
Awesome.